we've got people coming in. Niels is here.
You got the
Michael
brain
Hirsch
trust.
is here. There's Matt's here. I saw Matt's name in here. Appreciate you all showing up. Some of you have been involved in the formation of this, and I just want to acknowledge, thank you for giving us hard, meaningful, and some really sincere feedback, what we were trying to propose and what we were trying to do. Um, and This work that we've got that Shardul and I put together is the result of a lot of meetings with people that are actually in conversation with people that are actually, some of you are actually here. We're sharing this out with you today. And I would just like to say that um, no introductions needed, but I'll let Shardul introduce himself if he chooses to. But I think most of us know us, you know what our reputation is, our backgrounds are. We're bringing this to you from a place of experience and a place of belief that what we're talking about is relevant and real. And we're actually interested in your thoughts and your feedback, but also we think we're on a journey and we want you to take this journey with us. We believe that we're on the tip of something that's meaningful for people who call themselves product managers and product professionals. And Shardul, I'll let you offer any insights or thoughts that you want to share.
I I think you summed it up pretty well. I think for anyone who doesn't know who I am or is meeting me for the first time, um, you can see right there, I'm founder of Street Smart Product Manager. I've been in product and leadership for a long time across a variety of industries. I have a weekly newsletter and a host a live show. People tell me they're pretty good, so I believe them. And there's our LinkedIn's. If we're not already connected, you can look us up, read more about each of us, me and Mike, and send us a connection request. We'd love to chat.
So I have a poll question because we've got a really diverse group of people here. Tell us what your role is. We built this with some assumptions. We want to tilt this and make it valuable for everybody, get a sense of who's in the room so we can steer the content accordingly. So we've got a good distribution. A lot of product leaders, people who call themselves product leaders, refer to themselves that way, VP, that kind of thing, or head of product. A lot of people who refer to themselves as director or team lead level. The fact those are pretty balanced. Some senior level people here that probably senior level seasoned ICs, and only a handful of people that are consider themselves junior in a role are less experienced, and then a large other group, which we'll figure out what that means later. We want to start this with something a little bit provocative. Shardul and I were playing around with this idea. What would happen if you walked in to your role and your CFO gave you a visit and said to you in very short order, we had a soft quarter. Um, this is the end of Q1. As you know, so goes Q1, predictor for the rest of the year. We want you to start thinking about how you can help us reduce expenses based on the performance to get in line so we can balance out the rest of the year. And we were asking you to consider or think about something as significant as a 15% cut. And after you pull yourself up off the floor or think you might want to go check to see how updated your resume is, you come to your senses. And so the question is, in many instances, do you know what you would cut? Do you know what you defend? What has to stay on the roadmap in order for it to remain relevant for the business? And the most important part, I think, is how you explain what these trade-offs means and how you, and I'll put in air quotes, this idea of how you sell this to your ELT peers so it doesn't turn into an escalation battle, an escalation discussion. So I'll pause and ask a question. Has anybody ever, show of hands, confronted this, dealt this? Is this real?
Or just put it in the, since we got so many, I'd just
Yeah,
say,
put it
put
in
it
the
in the
chat.
chat.
Respond in, thank you. Respond in the
Have
chat.
you faced this? If you have, just briefly, how did you deal with it? Or if you haven't, how would you?
Well,
And
yeah.
panic is a legitimate answer,
That's a
but
that's a good first response, right, Shardul?
yeah.
I can't imagine if you've been doing this job for more than about 3 or 4 years, you haven't seen this, you haven't been near the room or possibly in the room where this happens. Um,
Yeah, so lots of
so
yeses.
yeah, I see that. Lots of hands going up. So this is real. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, but we are closing Q1. I've been in this situation. Shardul, I know you've shared stories with me. You've been in a situation. It can happen. This is not mid-year. It can happen as early as starting this quarter. And one of the things I think that's important is to understand that most of our roadmaps, they're not built by design to handle this. That the real issue here is we built something that we believe is a reasonable plan. We've built it around some great assumptions. We've done the homework. But when people start poking at it underneath the foundation of it, not based on the strength of the strategy, not based on the soundness of the product work that has to go on, but on something completely different, it's hard to negotiate this. It's hard to drive this forward. Shardul, I don't know if you have any comments or anything you want to share at
Uh,
this point.
no, I think first of all, just seeing the responses in the chat, obviously this is something people feel very acutely. By the way, you might want to boot off Bob um, in the chat. But anyways, like Luke has this great example of we have 12 months of funding left for 18 months of development right now. So, you know, um, but so why don't we move to the next slide? Because I think we can, that kind of gets to the comments I want to make. So, so I appreciate everyone's comments. Normally, what we've seen, what Mike and I have seen, and we've experienced this firsthand, we've seen others, is what normally happens is, well, besides panic, is, you know, the pattern is pretty identical, right? When the pressure really hits, okay, most product teams reach to do the things that they kind of already know and that's familiar, right? They start debating features. You see feature lists and NPS scores and velocity metrics and things like that. All of which, frankly, are pretty invisible to the people who are asking the hard questions. It's just the wrong scoreboard because at the end of the day, the CFO isn't really looking at your detailed roadmap, right? They're looking at some spreadsheet, they're looking at the financials, and those two things don't speak the same language. Also, what often happens is that people start debating and defending their pet initiatives, sometimes with some cost logic. Well, we've already started investing in this. We've already started the development on it, right? So we kind of have to see it through, which doesn't always make sense. And so the roadmap gets reopened without a lot of structure, right? Without really any real commitment. And as a result, what that really means is that it never really closes. Now, that's not to say a roadmap is set in stone and it's permanent forever, right? It does need to respond to market realities, business realities. But at the same time, what we don't want to have to do is keep relitigating the roadmap every month or every week for that matter. And so the result is this reset cascade, right? So if you go to the next slide, Mike, you kind of fall a lot of organizations, and of course nobody here gets into this. I know that, right? It's other organizations, of course. But what we've seen, Mike and I, is that this reset cascade starts, right? The constraints change, trade-offs are made, they're unspoken. Instead of making them explicit, they're often implicit. The priorities start getting relitigated, especially once you start getting into like the feature debate. Then priorities start getting relitigated all over the place. Escalation battles start, especially the classic example is from sales, right? We got to close this deal or this customer needs this thing. If we can just get this one feature, we promise we can close this deal. And so it just creates this organizational thrash because it starts then cascading down throughout all the way down to the individual teams that have to actually execute on this stuff, right? And so it results in a lot of lost focus, lost volatility, and on a personal level, it means that we as product leaders, we lose the room. There's, let's be honest, our credibility is at stake as well in this. And so if we're not able to facilitate this conversation effectively with this audience, specifically here, we're talking about the ELT, right? Then we're going to lose the room and we're going to lose lose credibility. And in the worst case situation, we will, and I've seen this happen, we will stop getting invited. Those decisions, those decisions will get made either with us or without us. And so if we don't facilitate them in the right way, they're going to happen without us, and then we're going to inherit whatever the outcome is from that. Anything to add to that, Mike?
No, I think sometimes we, out of frustration, we refer to this as the politics, but really what this is the way the business works and part of the culture impact of it. And what we're suggesting is there is a path forward. There is a way to do this rather than fight political with emotion. And that's what we want to talk about. So,
And one other quick thing I'll add is that, aside from just the emotional toil, of course, or the political toil, there are real implications, right? It's not just frustration, but teams have to pause or suddenly take a left turn, which means lost momentum. And that lost momentum can create potential lost business and market opportunities, right? And you multiply that by the number of times it may happen, let's say in a year, in a quarter, and that's a number that nobody's really tracking, but everybody is paying it, and the burden inevitably falls on product leaders. And Mike, it's good we took that poll because it means there's a lot of folks, and I'm just gonna call this out. Fortunately, we've got a lot of senior leaders in the room, but we've also got a lot of folks who are, let's say, they're at the director level or the team lead level. And I've been in your shoes, I've been in that seat, and let's be honest, folks, we're the ones. These are the folks who inevitably get the burden.
that's where the pain
falls
is.
on-
That's where the jerking and the thrashing. You have organizational thrash.
Yeah.
The director, team lead level is the person that's feeling this on a day-to-day basis between trying to guide and move your team forward, whether that's 6 or 8 or 12, and trying to interface to the higher ups to make sure to have them understand that what they're asking for is so far outside of bounds of what you normally do and what you would consider appropriate for getting the work done, and that there's a gap and nobody's filling it. That's what you're feeling is the thrash is nobody's feeling this gap and nobody understands it. And that's the awful part about it. That's the hard part about it. I think we have some things we want to hand to, or at least ideas, want to share and get feedback on how to offset some of that thrash.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, cool. So let's get to it.
So I created sort of an example, and we're working with some things that deal with decision discipline. And as luck would have it, I prepared a document which somehow Zoom will not let me share with you right now. I swear to you, I'll give it to you before we get out of here today. For those people who like to read along, it's a quick one-pager that kind of breaks this down. Took a fictitious company, an amalgamation of the kind of things that Shardul and I have seen over the years and over our own engagements, and the proposal or the idea is starting with this 15% cut idea. And the thought process being, if you were sitting in this company and this company has, and I put up 3 of the primary business conditions, and without the document, I think we'll be able to get through this, and I'll make sure that I prepare and give a lot of explanation as needed, that you have 3 initiatives sitting here that you've locked in and that you're proceeding on, and it follows, and it's not unrealistic, it follows some form and function, and assume that the rest of what's going on is just the normal maintenance, normal commitments, normal things that go on in the course of the business. And the ask is go find 10 to 15% and come back and tell us what has to be done, what has to be given up, and what has to change. How do you meet this plan? And so that's the premise that we're working with to try and ground some of these ideas in something real. I would add to you that Shardul and I have built this with the idea of doing this as a bespoke or a highly customized engagement. And what we would put in here if we were doing this in an organization would be your actual situation, your business model, your data, your roadmap, the kinds of things that we would be using to kind of build this out so that the walkaway is something that's real and something that's tangible. And the work that we do in a session becomes the work that you can continue to do. So with that said, and my disclaimer about the document that doesn't want to show up for me, let's proceed. So this thought is this idea of real mid-year correction. What kinds of things are initially fundable here, and we're going to talk about that. What kinds of things do you kill? And what's the decision criteria to set this up and actually get this answer back to the CFO? We think that this requires a mindset shift. We think that you have to kind of think differently about this. Um, Many of us, and I'm one of them, were trained, experienced to basically run this part of the business driving the roadmap. And I'm not, this is not dispirited. This is not antagonistic toward anybody. It's just this is the mindset. We're driven for delivery, we're driven for alignment, we're driven for optimization of resources, we're driven to make sure the capacity doesn't our appetite doesn't outstrip our capacity, and it requires a certain way of thinking about the business, and this is what we do. The consequences are, and we already know this, and by the show of hands we got at the beginning, priorities are always up for grabs. CRO has a bad quarter, and doggone it, he wants or she wants you to put item number 6 on a priority list to the top because you've got 2 reps are swearing they can close it by the mid-year. It's just reality. Oftentimes because of customer commitments or somebody slams something, nobody's ever experienced this. Somebody, your best salesperson goes out and closes a $7 million deal or something gargantuan, and suddenly you realize you need to pull 5 of your lead engineers off of the work they're doing to meet the commitment that's already in the contract that's sitting there with a rev rec problem. Nobody's ever experienced that, right? But this is what we live in, and this is how we react. And I want to say this, the fact that we can survive this says a lot about the strength of the people, the intelligence of the people, and the patience. But what's required to move to this other paradigm is to start by asking a different question. And the question is obvious, and I'm not going to read it to you, but it's thinking like this is a portfolio, not like a roadmap. And I came to this, and I've seen people come to this, and we, during the process of doing this, and a couple of these people are actually on this call, we interviewed people, and their approach toward this is a little different in that they almost don't care which of these initiatives make it through to completion. They don't have an emotional investment in the features. They don't have an emotional investment in the technology. They're using that as a base to accomplish a business objective. So they are funding using terminology that sounds like an investment. They're funding, they're making high conviction bets, they're trying to balance the portfolio by doing some exploratory stuff. They're trying to basically kill things before they get out in the wild that start chewing up resources. And the most important thing is that everything has to be explained in explicit dollar choices. That's the only way the ELT gets it. I don't care how much training you give them about product processes, that's what they get. And that the other piece of it is that there's always a trade-off. There's always a trade-off. I've experienced, Shardul has experienced, and most of you experience where we are asked to make these transitions and these changes. And when we finish, we give up the capacity or we give up the budget, but nothing changed on the wish list. So it's like message, do more with less. Shardul, you have anything you want to add to this? I waxed on quite a bit, but please.
No, so I want to share a quick story with everyone. So I got my MBA and I took a finance course on portfolio management. And then I became a product manager and immediately forgot about all that stuff because what I was trained on and I thought my job was the stuff on the left, right? Which we've labeled here roadmap manager. And in fact, furthermore, I was incentivized to do it. That's how I was rewarded, right? And that's how I suspect a lot of the folks here have been as well. This is what we were told to do. This is what we were trained to do. This is what we were rewarded to do. And then I had an epiphany, not because somebody from the ELT told me, hey, this is what we want from product management. I had an epiphany where I realized that when I did the stuff on the right, that's what actually changed the game. And that's what they actually really wanted. It's sort of that classic thing of like when you go to customers and ask them what they want, right? They're going to list a bunch of features, but that's not really what they want, right? They want you to solve their problems. It's kind of similar in that regard. When I realized that actually what I need to do is to do the stuff that Mike just talked about, act more like a portfolio owner, right? And then talk about where are we making these investment bets from a product perspective, from a market perspective, how are we facilitating these trade-offs. That changed the game. And that's when even they realized, oh yeah, no, this is what we need from product management. Absolutely. Even though literally the job description when I applied for the job was completely different, right? So this is one of the really interesting disconnects that I've found. And I think in the conversations Mike and I have had with many of some of the folks who are on this call, but many of the others who are in, especially at the top level of product leadership, is that same kind of realization that actually this is what the job is really about, really about. And so that's the shift that is really needed. You'll rarely see it in a job description. I think they'll still keep rewarding delivery and feature feature delivery because in their minds that connects to revenue. So there's an element of like, I don't know that we can necessarily expect always for them to come and say, oh, we're hiring, let's say, a chief of product or a VP or director even, and the job description essentially is the one on the right, the portfolio owner. It might actually sound more like the one on the left. But if you really want to make an impact and earn that credibility and have your life be a little bit better, you really want to do the stuff on the right.
So let's move on. You have some comments you want to talk about the scorecard?
Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
should go real quick. If you go back one slide, aren't
Yeah.
these two different roles? Meaning,
Um,
if you're a if you're a product manager, you are managing one product. If you are a portfolio manager, or just without taking titles, if you're managing more than one product or one platform initiative or something like that, now all of a sudden you can be responsible for the trade-off. So, but I think it's important to note, if you're hired as a product manager over one product, you don't have the visibility to see trade-offs in the same way as an individual who is responsible for multiple products.
I, I would agree with you, Perry, 100% on that, except that if I pull this thread down, when I look at the backlog, if I'm a product team lead, maybe not an individual contributor yet, but a team lead, I'm sitting with the same business challenge, right? There's 150 things in the backlog. We've done our best to prioritize them. The best companies I've seen do, they come up with an ordinal, this really hard, strong list, 1 through N, and we're going to get down as far as we can. And yet the same tension shows up at that level. So it it scales down and up that the backlog in effect is a portfolio of choices, of resource consumption, of time spent. And if I had $20 for every time someone told me they went through an iteration of 4 sprints and built something that was critically important that sales thought they needed the next quarter, and a year later they hadn't sold one stitch of it, I wouldn't be on this call today, I tell you that. So to me, the same principle applies. And you're right, to break this up into scale. The other question you have to ask yourself is, where do you start learning this? If you wait till you become a VP of product to start learning this, I'm going to say this, you're in trouble. The onslaught is already at you. And we're already now starting to ask you to do this nasty or this big time dance. And the only thing you've done is the basic steps. So where do you start teaching people how to think this way? And I think the earlier the better. Shardul and I were having a conversation before we started saying you've got to capture this thought process change at the top, the leadership level, because they can transform the organization. And you have to start catching people early in their careers to have this mindset. We are running way long on time. I just want to bring that up. I know. And I just looked at my watch and I did exactly what Jen did. I went, oh my God, we're at slide 9. Anyway, but I'm not going to worry about that. We will go as long as people want to be here and have this conversation. So I'll declare that. And then if you have to leave, come back later or you're going to get a recording. But the point of this is when we start teaching people to do this thinking, and we're not asking people to stop being builders. That's not what we're suggesting. We're not telling you that the craft doesn't matter anymore. Quite the contrary. But we are admitting the fact that we're at the beginning of a shift where the constraint is not building anymore. And people can have great arguments about how soon that shows up, but all of us can see that that constraint is being broken down. So what do we need to overlay so that the work stays reasonable and our value contribution stays meaningful to the company? And I think this is the essence of the thinking process. But Perry, I want to stop you and say thank you for sharing that thought, because I think it's meaningful. It's very meaningful.
I do want to just clarify for folks. So, I mean, this talk is definitely more geared towards folks in leadership roles. And that's the bulk of the folks. That said, and so at that level, I would argue you're essentially a portfolio operator, right? Whether you have, and I would even say whether you have 10 products or one product, right? Or a platform or whatever it is that you're managing. But to Mike's point, there is, and maybe this is a future talk for individual PMs, there is a mindset shift. So yeah, you may just have the one product or just the piece of the product that you're operating against, but you do have I don't mean a JIRA backlog, I'm just using that word more generically, a backlog of things you want to be able to do. You still want to be able to have this mindset approach, which kind of gets to this slide, which is really, you want to be able to map things to one of these three scoreboards, right? So what we've seen is that the best leaders are able to map any initiative to this scoreboard. Now, the specific metrics may, of course, vary for your particular product and business, but the point here is that you need to be able to say that this bet is a growth bet or drive retention or efficiency, maybe related to one or more of these metrics or whatever are the equivalent metrics for your business. But the point is some meaningful business outcome, meaning some financial or economic outcome. You don't have to build some complex financial model or DCF or some huge ROI calculator, but you do need to be able to say, here's the mechanism, here's what we expect to move, and here's the evidence that supports that particular thesis. So it's this approach that can then turn the roadmap review into what Mike and I have been calling a capital allocation conversation, which honestly is really the only conversation that results in some form of durable commitment, right? So if you can't map the bet to this scoreboard, you just can't expect commitment. Any agreement is tenuous at best until the next fire.
So go back to our little challenge problem. You're being asked to make this cut. I say you start pushback on, not hard pushback, but clarification, ELT, CFO. What do you want me to cut? And this exercise starts with declaring what constraints you have, budget, financial, whatever, and what is being protected and what's non-negotiable. Most product leaders that I know will have this well understood and well in hand, but I also think it's critical to document it, get it concise, and get everybody around that table to absolutely buy in that this is the priority, and then go off and do the work. If you don't do this, then it turns into something chaotic, and it's hard to then get control of it. I talk to people, we've talked to people, a lot of people. I think at the leadership level, we somehow managed to get our features, all of the 150 or 150,000 things that we have available to do into some kind of organized fashion. What I have seen in 2 years of working inside PE-backed firms and portfolios of companies is that work is done, but the piece that oftentimes doesn't get done, especially on the front end, is defining very specifically the outcome. I think most teams know the cost. I think most teams understand some of the risk, but the outcome, the through line to the P&L, the through line to the sales metric, the through line to the margin metric is where it's soft. And what we're saying for this exercise, it becomes critical because, go back to the idea, we're staging up and setting up trade-offs. So my example here is this AI co-pilot. There's some upside belief that there's $2 million of ARR. There's some expensive dev costs, 2 pods running at six months. And yet we don't have any commercial signals. and confidence is low because we're basically working with hypothesis. Doesn't mean that we don't do this. It just means in a certain environment, this is viable. It's even encouraged. We even want it. In certain environments, it's not. So we trigger this idea of doing decision discipline. And when I've done coaching with people, workshops with people, I always ask the question, if you looked at your product elements that have been released in the last 10 months or 6 months, whatever, if you started today, which ones would you actually fund based on what you know? And while some resist that exercise, and I understand that, many go through and they end up with a lot of question marks. So we are laying this idea of this decision discipline that says this is where we believe, and we've confirmed with others, that the trigger actually gets defined, that the conditions before you start predefining what is it that we're locking in, what is high value, high leverage, high durability, how is it manifested in terms of tied to a board metric or some through line to growth or efficiency or margin, and what does it take to kill it, and if the killing of this exercise or this initiative increases the cost of delay, or if the bet is defensible, that's a lock. If we're just looking at adjusting, it gives us, and we do this routinely. I've seen it done. I've done it myself. We descope things. We change timing where we're in flex. And the last one on the bottom is the one where I think that we probably as an industry don't do well. We don't stop things that we know are going badly. I've been in situations, I've been the person that knew that something wasn't, the assumptions didn't hold. There's low leverage relative to our strategic direction, our strategic constraints, or if we spent the resource doing something else, we'd probably get better value. And the argument that we're using is sunk costs. And what we're saying is we need to identify those things. And the goal is to change the conversation from one that's political to one that is predefined, so that when we get to this stage of the reset, we have something to go back to and say, have we met the conditions to revisit what we agreed to do or what we committed to do as a team at the outset? And by the way, the first team here I'm talking about is the ELT, assuming that a head of product or a CPO or even the director or team lead is involved in that conversations. The first team is the senior leadership team sitting around a table agreeing that the roadmap is going to deliver the business value and the business results they want. And when we finish this work, and I put this cute little template up here to kind of simplify it, we should be able to go back and look at these things and determine where we lock in, where we lock out, what we adjust and what we don't, and then run the scan. All of the things that we do routinely, commercial signals, GTM signals, product signals, before we propose this cut. And if I go back to this example, we're going to go through and talk about how this would fall out. So in this example that we have, there's this AI project. It's exciting. People are crazy about it. No commercial, a limited commercial value, none showing up, and a fairly expensive cost. There's this other element, another initiative, which is a classic one we've seen, where we've got 3 large accounts, a significant amount of revenue on the table, and a runtime basically of 60 days to deliver, and it's costing the company a lot of money. And then this other thing that we're calling activation, retention, or expansion bet, where we've got a fair amount of risk on the table in terms of holding the line on NRR, which right now is baked into the system to be 104% of the previous year. And we've got about 4 months to build this capability. And the intent and the belief is that it could expand the base of business by about $3 million. And now I got to the heavy-duty confusing slide. We believe that setting up packages for this, which allows us to decide to protect growth or protect retention or maintain stability. And the belief or the idea is to protect a specific outcome. So we adjust the first option, which is the AI copilot. We lock in the enterprise integration capability. This is one idea. And then this option says, and then we kill the activation or expansion one simply because of the reasons. What stops? AI gets descoped. because it's only proof of concept. Run with a lead time of 12 weeks to pull the trigger on it. We reassign the pod, decommit some of the resources. Yes, we will, because it's impacted, we will lose some early adopters, potential, and lose momentum. The NRR could erode and would kill C, so we could also put at risk this $3 million of expansion. And this one, we have a different decision. It's a different decision idea. We kill the pilot, we lock in the other two elements to preserve and protect the business. And you can read through this, and I'll let it stay up here for a while, but the idea is not that there's a specific right answer here. It's that there's a specific decision discipline that you take this, that this is taken back to the ELT and it's massaged and digested by the team so that we're making decisions so that one thing becomes absolutely clear, that we're making this change, we're adjusting to new budget conditions and new realities, and something has to be given. Displaced. Dollars have to be displaced. That means something has to be removed from the roadmap. I'm going to pause here because there may be questions about this.
Mike, I have one question. We don't get explicitly shared the business context behind those bets. Now, how do we get those business contexts shared?
So you're absolutely right. You may not see this at an individual contributor role, but your leadership team should have access to this, at least to some extent, or be able to ask for it. And so this is common information about what the strength of the business is. If I were doing this in an environment where your company was, we would extract this and bring this out because this would be part of the work that happens. Not sure if that's a
Yeah. The way I'm going to be, Mike's a nice guy. I'm going to be more explicit. So, your job as a PM is to get access to that insight. Your product leader's job is to give you insight into that business context. And if that's not happening, then frankly, the business leader is not giving you that or giving you access to that business context, and there's a problem. And if you are not, but on your end, you need to make sure you are at least within your domain. You know, that's the thing, that's the poking around you need to do. Understand your sales cycle. We'll get back on this topic, but like that's one, by the way, on my show, if you guys don't mind a shameless plug, we've talked a lot about for individual PMs.
Somebody made a comment I think is worth calling out. It says, get the ELT on the same page. And to actually respond to the question that was asked was, it's in the best interest of your organization to share some level of this information. People make better decisions. Clay, you had your hand up. Please, let me take you off mute.
Yeah, I'm not following something here. So this slide is just for the AI project, AI Copilot, right?
And yes, but the idea here is not so. I mean, you can get the details can be overwhelming to kind of prove an example. The real question or the real answer here is less about getting the right answer and more about your reasoning process. Mm-hmm. So setting up the decision discipline, predefining what success looks like, what good looks like, predefining so that you don't have these open sessions that you get caught off guard and you're renegotiating the prioritization from 30 days ago. Empowering the product team and all the way down to individuals. What conditions have we seen that would warrant us to change what we decided to do 30 days ago or 60 days ago? Whatever that is.
And it also seems like a big part of this is having a clear enough process so that you're using the same process at everything you look at. So you don't have this problem of, yeah, so you're comparing apples to apples. Can you go back to that other slide with just want to make sure I'm understanding. So you've got the ABC for each one of those. I'm not clear on why they're in a different order. What does that mean? Like you've got A, B, C. Oh, they're different colors. So
different colors. A is so yeah. So the color coding is kill. It's red.
Let me
adjust is green. Blue is lock.
Let me step in here real quick. Um, this is, this is good feedback. Maybe we needed to clarify the slide a little bit. So let's not get too lost in the details of the slide. The point here is that rather than debating individual features and things, you can put things into packages, kind of like on these dimensions that you see at the top, right? And the implication is that, okay, if our goal is to protect growth, what does that growth package look like under this 15% cut scenario? And then these are the implications of it. Maybe we do the AI copilot and it's de-scoped to a proof of concept, whatever that implication is. Or is it about protecting retention? Or is it about protecting stability? Or give it the labels that make sense for your
these
business, right?
these are mutually exclusive scenarios, right? These 3 columns.
The intention is to offer back to your leadership team an answer to the question. And the question is, you can protect growth.
Okay.
You can protect retention.
Okay.
Or you can protect stability.
As
So
an
you're-
example.
so you're turning-
This is specific to the example that we laid out.
And
Okay.
yes, they
in
need
your-
to be exclusive or because we can't do everything,
Sure.
right? So whatever those packages end up looking like, you are forcing, because you've been forced to make a hard choice. Hey, we got to cut 15% of the roadmap. Okay, well, that means some hard choices. It's A, B, or C, or whatever that is. That's what these packages look like. And in each of these scenarios, it means certain things. Certain things will stop. Certain things will get impacted. There's a risk factor for each of them. That's the risk profile you need to present. And then there's a certain type of outcome we will get under each of those scenarios. Now, where do we want to take the pain? Where are we willing to take the pain so we can get the best outcome we want, depending upon the goals of the business? As a quick example, if the CFO, let's say, is saying, we got to take a 15% cut, but we still have a growth goal. Okay, that's interesting versus, and I've been in this situation where we're taking a 15% cut, forget about growth. Right now, the ship is taking so much water, we just gotta get control.
Plug the
it is
leaks.
about profit and margin protection. That is goal number 1. If we end up sacrificing, as long as we don't lose revenue, we may not be able to hit our original growth goals. That's okay. If I'm the head of product and I hear that, those are 2 very different messages under the same 15% cut scenario. And as a result, I'm going to come back and present different options under each of these scenarios as to what the implications are in terms of our roadmap, in terms of the again, using this messaging that we've been talking about, this bets approach, this portfolio approach. Does that clarify it?
Yeah.
Here's
So
the
and
most-
also the 3 colors, the green of the A, B, and C, are those the same as the colors below that? So is the green shading mean adjust and the red shading mean
I think
kill?
that's just a coincidence.
Just
I think
coincidence.
that's more
Okay.
coincidence.
Okay.
That's what happens when you ask Claude to do slide design. So you iterate and you iterate. I think the most important takeaway here, and somebody actually said it in the chat, is to get the decision-making team, the people that sit around the table, to see this for what it really is.
Yeah.
I've been in the room, I've seen players in the product organization take this process on and literally fall down on their own sword by not pushing trade-offs, by not showing that this is painful. And the CRO, the CEO, the CEO, and the CFO walk out and say, okay, job done. And it's because they shifted the burden of this to, okay, they're going to do everything that we want. They're just going to take out 5 heads or 7 heads or whatever the number is, which is the non-starter, right?
Yeah.
And so this is getting people to see, if you want to do growth, this is how we accomplish this. If you want to produce stability, this is how we accomplish this. And the most important thing is something's got to hurt. And the most important thing a product leader can do, a product director can do, and in a conversation where product managers are engaged, is understand that you don't get a free lunch, that something's got to give.
So
And
we're
This is
taking
where they are now feeling your pain.
right.
yeah.
You've
So we're
translated
taking
your
what
pain
was
so if you like on the previous slide, otherwise what ends up typically happening, sorry, Mike, to take us back, but just quickly on the previous slide where we have, do we do the AI copilot or the enterprise integration pack or this engine? Now we're debating features.
Well,
Right.
It
I
is
was gonna say,
it is
typically we don't
frustrating, and
get
the
we don't
CEO
get
is
to
like, I want to do my AI co-pilot no matter what. You're sitting there like, yeah, but dude, that doesn't make any sense, right?
Right. So we're turning an essay test for them into a multiple choice test so they
I
can choose
like
their
the
own
way
adventure.
Yeah.
And then we're also giving them the implications of each one so that they know ahead of time, by the way, this means you don't get dessert with your meal if you want the steak.
we're back to this idea of reasoning. We're back to this idea of how to make the cuts defensible, how to understand how to keep the things on the roadmap that we want. And the answer, in my opinion, for this exercise especially is less important than how you get to this answer that we're making trade-offs. We're going to meet the expectation and that something's going to change, something's going to give, that you don't get the zero-sum game out of this. And we think of this not as a resetting. A reset is not a roadmap. In fact, I'll give you one. Product leaders, product directors should be doing this on a routine basis. And we talk to some people, and at least one of them's here, that run their systems like this. They take these approaches and these views, and this is what they do as a matter of course. Call it prevention, call it strategic insight, call it educating and raising the skill set of the team. They're constantly looking at these things so that they can operate the business as a business. And the overlay out of this, I'm going to use an ugly word some people don't like, is the product leadership gets the benefit of driving some form of lean governance, which is the best form of protection I think a product organization has, is do we follow the disciplines? Do we do the work? Do we account for the work? And then do we manage the process to make sure the work stays on track? You know, we spent some time on this and we saw a number of things that people were telling us, and we believe this is part of a system that everybody is going to be at different places in this. And I would say that a large number of people, I don't know anybody that's operating at level 1. And there are also very few people that are operating probably at this level 4, that everybody is doing some variance of this. And we consider this part of an overall thing. So we've tried to take in 45 minutes, actually a little longer than that, 53 minutes, kind of a slice of what we've compiled and what we put together. That's a 2-day exercise and a highly bespoke exercise. And we see people on this process and on this journey. And we believe that there's an opportunity for teams, leaders, and individuals to sort of apply some principles to move from level 2, if that's where you're operating, to level 3. And there's some basic steps like forming investable bets. Is my work fundable? Is it tied? Is there a tied through line to actually get to the business outcomes that people are calling for, and are they specific, versus going to a level 4, if you will, where we're thinking in portfolio think. We think about the business in a way of making strategic calls and strategic bets. We're not, in this environment, the product team is not reacting to resets, they're leading them, they're driving them. Any other comments or questions? You have comments you have, Shardul?
No, I think that covers it very well. We have if you guys are really interested, we have an assessment that you can actually download, which I'll put in the chat. You can kind of get a sense of like where you are in your organization. Spoiler, you might be surprised where you think you are versus where you actually are. So I put it in the chat. You can go ahead and download it there for free. And then obviously, if you want to talk more about it, you can follow up with me and Mike, which is this slide. There you go.
Yes. Feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. We would offer 45-minute consultation. There's no fee for this, to walk through some of the things you're dealing with, real issues, real constraints. And what we would offer as an outcome is an approach to set this thing up and run with it. Not a complete solution, but at least, for lack of a better term, a roadmap on how to attack.
I put my calendar on the chat as well. Let's dive into questions. I know we're 10 minutes over, but we can maybe go 5 more minutes for anyone who wants to hang out and try to get to as many questions as we can. Luke, did you have your hand up at one point?
Luke had his hand up for a long time, and we got really distracted.
I did.
Sorry, Luke.
That's all right. So I just want to say I really love the framing of this. Most of the time when you sit around with a number of PMs and you say you need to start redefining what your roadmap looks like because of a financial pressure or a business reality, what they'll typically do is they'll look at their list of features and they'll say, I can live without this, I can live without this, or they'll look at their list of backlog items and they'll pick the pieces they want and the pieces they don't. What they don't tend to typically do, or what I haven't seen very often, is people go through and take a process like this to say, okay, well, how can we approach some of these things differently? And what could we potentially time box, or what could we adjust based on the business outcome we're trying to achieve, as opposed to whether or not we build that particular piece. So I really like the framing. I think that the mindset behind it could be very valuable. And I think from that individual contributor up, I think this is fantastic. So I can't wait to see the book come out. And I'll definitely be going back to our product community of practice with some of this in the next few weeks and trying to change our conversation a little bit. So thanks, guys.
Thank you for that feedback. That's very helpful.
I tried to get to as many of the comments and questions in chat as I could. So if I missed your question, feel free to like ping us. Sheldon has a question. In this AI age, convincing leadership to deprioritize AI products features is difficult, even if the older products features are profitable short term. Is tricky due to the hype of AI increasing all around. It puts pressure on PM leaders to deliver the hype. Okay, so Sheldon, I'll say a couple of things on this. And I remember, I think in one of my episodes, in fact, we even addressed this. Maybe it was the one with Simonetta. I'll say super quick because this could easily be like its own webinar or something, right? One is that that was why we had that AI Copilot example, right? That's one way to. Now, at the end of the day, you might still lose because the CEO is like, we're just going to do this, right? But the other thing is that, look, like, let's just call a spade reality. Like, sometimes we want to do it because it impacts our valuation, right? There is no real tangible, clear business benefit, at least in the short term, but we know it's going to give us a valuation boost among investors and things like that. So that's why we're doing the AI thing. What we can do is then just make clear is that, okay, if we're doing this thing, here are the implications of that, right? Because there's always a cost to, if we're going to do one thing, we're not going to do this other thing, and there's implications of that.
Oh, I put it in the comment. Kind of my summary for myself, at least, is this really provides guardrails, this framework, to collaborate with the shareholders without that spinning out of control.
Exactly.
That's right. That's right.
Because you're now talking in, frankly, we're all talking the same language, right? A lot of it just gets lost in translation. And one of the things that Mike and I have discovered, especially when we talk to, like, we spend a lot of time talking to those at that top product leaders, CPOs, SVPs, VPs, and they are investing a lot of time paying what we call this translation tax on behalf of their teams, right? So if, as a product team at large, if we can bridge that gap, that helps with our credibility.
So some of the best people we talk to in this process methodically, and Jen, I'm going to respond to your hand up in just a second, methodically have a best practice, call it a playbook, whatever you want. We talked to two people who just entered the role. The first 60, 90 days in their new job as head of product, this is what they're laying down. They're laying down the guardrails for this so that the variation and the strange reactions never, I won't say they never show up, but they and their team are now able to handle them in a more proactive, a more progressive way than being at the mercy of the emotional swings of the ELT because the business looks different than they thought it did. Jen, I'm going to let you, you've had your hand up for a while. Go ahead and ask your question, please.
No, and it wasn't that long, but I'm going to have a statement and then maybe a question. But I recently was on another webinar and was reminded that a lot of the leadership, sometimes they don't know what they're doing, right? And you need to kind of handhold them. So do you have any examples or words of wisdom, words of encouragement for us that are right trying to bring this model in and encourage, right? Like how do you get them focused and redirect, or when you responding to that a little bit of pushback and you need to educate them?
So that's a great question, and it's a fair question because there you sit and you have to raise this issue and bring it up. The first thing I would say if I was stepping into a head of product role today is I would spend the first 60, 90 days restructuring and organizing my team around these foundational principles, these guardrails, as Clay used. And then that, we talked to a number of product VPs that were, some of them were emotional and frustrated because they're thrashing by themselves, right? Team is working the roadmap, doing delivery, and they're the only person in the building, in the organization, the virtual building, speaking to these issues. Well, that's hard. It's tiring. And I'd say you're letting your team off the hook. And so the first thing to do is to get your team organized, get your structure set up, get your guardrails down. I'm going to call out Perry by name. Perry gave us some very instructional things. He said, well, here's my approach. I walk into a new company, I find the best and brightest on my new team, and I pluck them out of the crew, and I say, I have a path for you to take you to the next level. Do you want to play or not? Well, that's a hell of an invitation if I'm a director with a new CPO, and I teach the method, I teach the approach. Well, now I've got not just one person singing that tune, I've got 6 or 10. And if they take it and translate it to their team, suddenly the CRO, the CFO, the CEO, whoever they are, what are those people in product drinking, right? There's something different about the way they talk, the way they act. They have to treat you differently now because the conversation is happening at a different level. So rather than, Jennifer, this is a long answer. Rather than taking it head on by yourself, it's like you arm the team and the resources you have to have this dialogue. I used to call this product management self-defense. This is the way to shift and flip the script and shift the conversation. It doesn't mean we say no. It doesn't mean we won't do these weird things, but we want people to be accountable for the decisions they're making. And that's the key.
Yeah, Jen, I think when we come in and start lecturing the organization on how to do things, that's a losing proposition. So what I started is, instead of coming in and saying, this is the way product management should be run, and lecturing them on thinking the right way, that ain't never going to work. But what does work is what Mike said about the 60, 90 days, and then just start doing it. And like, rarely ever have I been in a situation where, if I frankly just don't talk the language of business, like, I'm not gonna get the attention of the room. So the moment I start, one of the things that I do in those first 30, 60, 90 days is really trying to understand the business and what's important to the business. Then I use that to translate our product work into that. So that's where my examples of, like, if growth is really important right now, then I'm going to tie a lot of the conversations to how does this affect growth, and so on and so forth.
Somebody said that we don't ask permission, you just do it. However you want to say that, ask for forgiveness, not for permission. Exactly. And the optimal time to do this is in the first 90 to 120 days in a new job. Because even if they don't like what you're doing, they're not going to stop you. That's not to say that you can't do this and build a bridge while you're doing it. You can come out of any iteration, a planning cycle, a roadmap reset, a successful quarter. Probably the best time to do this is start introducing these concepts, and, like you said, just start doing it. I think that was Justin that said that. Justine. Yeah. I want to do a time check for everybody. We're at 165 minutes here. We still got 22 people on. That's fabulous. My greatest expectation was that we'd have somebody left at the end of the hour that would want to hear this. And so we've exceeded my expectations. I just want to say thank you for that. Appreciate it. Feel free to reach out to either one or both of us. Happy to have the conversation, happy to engage, and happy to explain what we're doing and where we're headed. Thank you very much for all your participation, your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.